So we start with this.
Okay.
Going into the Super Bowl, we knew Philadelphia was good, but they looked unbeatable. But I asked a question. Are we sure their defense is great, or did it end up looking great because it carved up awful NFC quarterbacks? The answer is yes. It's not that good of a defense. Mahomes had one incompletion in the entire second half, and it was a throwaway. It looked like summer 7-on-7 drills. He scored on every second half possession. That vaunted Eagles D-line, and I questioned it last week, record for sacks, had none. Bagel, goose egg, none. Philadelphia faced 20 quarterbacks since week 5. None were Pro Bowlers. Mahomes owned them. Philadelphia's defense faced 5 good quarterbacks all year. Trevor Lawrence, Aaron Rodgers, Mahomes, Jared Goff, and Dak once. They averaged 33.5 points. Blame the ref. But the only reason we thought Philadelphia was better in this game is because Mahomes was never on the field in the first half. The minute he was, it was a mismatch. One incompletion in an entire second half of a Super Bowl? Beyond that, the run game for the Chiefs, the run game, averaged over 6 yards a carry. They averaged 6.5 yards a play. The Eagles had no sacks. Patrick Mahomes only had the ball for 24 minutes, and he scored 38 points. Blame whoever you want. Philadelphia never got tested in the regular season. Daniel Jones 3 times? Really? Dak once? The Commanders' offense was a mess, and they certainly weren't tested in the playoffs. The Niners were snapping a ball to a running back in the end. And in their first big challenge, their first great quarterback postseason, I don't know if they folded. They were just unveiled as a very, very good defense against bad quarterbacks. Folks, Kansas City did everything they wanted to do once Mahomes could be on the field, and that was my concern. My concern for Kansas City going in, I like the Chiefs, was, are they going to bleed the Chiefs to death by running the football? And they did for the first 90 minutes. Mahomes watched the game. That was my big concern. Would Mahomes watch it with this offense? And that's what happened. But second halves are really big in Super Bowls because you're usually facing a great coach, Andy Reid, or a great quarterback, Patrick Mahomes. Daniel Jones, second half, already trailing by 2 or 3 touchdowns. That's not a challenge. That's where Philly got most of their sacks. Philly had no sacks. Couldn't stop the run. And Philly's going to be back, and I love their quarterback. And their aggressive head coach feels like he fits the organization perfectly. But here's another thing. In the congested red zone, the most congested area of the field, 2 different times, the Philadelphia defense wasn't within 10 yards of an Eagle receiver. That's high school stuff. That is Andy Reid seeing a defense that cheats on motion. By the way, Andy Reid's, one of his best friends is Doug Peterson. Doug Peterson coaches the Jags. The Jags used this play against Philadelphia earlier this year. Doug Peterson calls Andy Reid, said they over-pursue, they cheat. Andy said, I'll remember that. Tells Bieniemy, and they used it twice. Folks, you cannot. This is a congested area. There's nobody within 10 yards. That is coaching. Andy Reid, the greatest play designer of my life, worked Philadelphia's defense. By the way, it's a longer halftime. Sometimes adjustments can be overstated in the short 15-minute time slot you have in the regular season. But at halftime of a Super Bowl, you can make real adjustments. Andy Reid did. The greatest play designer of my life with Patrick Mahomes at the helm. This is a combination we've seen before. When the great coach, Bill Walsh, has the great quarterback, Joe Montana, you dominate the sport. when the great coach, Chuck Noll, has the great quarterback and defense, Terry Bradshaw. You dominate the sport. Belichick and Brady. And that is now, in the details and the play design, Andy Reid and Mahomes. As great as Andy is, it's virtually unstoppable in big games. Here's Andy after.
He grew up in a locker room. He's seen the greats, and he strives to be the greatest. I mean, without saying anything, that's the way he works. I mean, he wants to be the greatest player ever. That's what he wants to do, and that's the way he goes about his business. And he does it humbly. You know, I mean, there's no bragging. He could stand up here and give you these stats that are incredible that he's had, but he's never going to do that. That's just not him. The great quarterbacks make everybody around him better, including the head coach.
Let's shift to the call. I hated it, not because it wasn't a penalty. Once I got the internet to show me 17 different angles on it, it was a penalty. Out of the break, you can't grab a receiver. They're not going to give you that. I didn't see it initially. And I like officials to step out of the way in the biggest spots. I call it situational officiating. Every time I say that, I get crushed by fans. But it was a penalty. It's just maddening, a perfect game. This becomes crucial. James Bradbury grabbed a jersey out of the break. Plus, and this is something that needs to be mentioned, it's coaching. The Eagles wore dark gloves. The Chiefs rarely wear white jerseys, but everybody knew they would. Rob Ninkovich, a former Patriot, said it today on the air. Belichick, whenever his teams faced a team in white jerseys, wore white gloves. Belichick unraveled brilliant young coach Sean McVay in a Super Bowl with tricks like that. Andy Reid did the same to Nick Sirianni. Dark gloves, white jerseys. Folks, when great teams play in big games, it is inches, not feet. We don't know if it would have been overlooked, but it's the little stuff that McVay admitted. Belichick's many trips to the Super Bowl, their prep was better, their game plan was better, their adjustments were better. The Eagles also had two massive mistakes in this game. Jalen Hurts fumbles, it's picked up for a touchdown. If I would have told you before the game, okay, there's this team and their quarterback's just going to lose the ball and it gets returned for a touchdown, would you think they would win? But this wasn't the only one. They also had a massive special teams gaffe. Sean Payton called it on the pregame show, didn't like Philly special teams. It is the longest punt return in NFL history. If I told you before the game, one team had a massive gaffe by their quarterback that resulted in a touchdown for the other team, and that same team had a major special teams gaffe, does it sound like you'd win the game? You can't make those mistakes in huge games against great teams. You can't. The Chiefs also had a major punt return, kick return against the Bengals. This is coaching. The Chiefs worked a younger coach. Go ahead, blame the refs. I get it. That's what fans do. And Philly did a lot of things right. But just think about this. The Philly defense was awful for 2 hours at the end. The Philly special teams had the gaffe of the game. And the vaunted Philly run game was nowhere to be found outside of Jalen Hurts. Kansas City's run game was better than Philly's run game. And it was Mahomes in the second half making key runs. Blame the ref. I get it. Great game. Movies, even an average movie, often has a great ending because you write it. And all the conspiracy wackos today are probably thinking that's the truth. This was a great game with an odd ending. But once you could see the grab out of the break, that's a penalty. Shannon Sharp saw it. Guys who have played in the game saw it. And here was the guy who did it, James Bradbury, a very good corner after the game.
Hold on it enough for that call at that time. I mean, that's not up for my judgment. You know, I was hoping he would let it go, but of course, you know, he's a ref. It's a big game, and it was a hold, so they called it.
I have been pushing back on fans for years. NBA fans will blame the refs, and their team misses 11 free throws and has 16 turnovers. But it's that hand check that bothers you. For 2.5 hours, the defense of the Eagles, which, by the way, the 49ers said during this week, there are a lot of holes with this defense. Mahomes and Reid are going to find them. 2.5 hours. The defense and the run game, where were they? Special teams, disaster. And you're going to blame a penalty that's a penalty because of the timing of it. Nick Sirianni, a young coach with an amazing future, talked about that call after.
Those guys got to do that in split second, scenarios. And so, that's what he saw, and he called it. And so that's never it. I know it always appears to be that, it's one call that makes the. It's not what it is, right? It's not what it is. There's so many plays that contribute to the end result of the game. And today they were better than we were.
For the record, here's the really positive news for Philadelphia. Jalen Hurts was unbelievable. He was unbelievable. His defense let him down. His special teams let him down. Let's be honest. His run game let him down. You could argue some defensive coaching let him down in the red zone. He is the only reason keeping Mahomes on the bench. This wasn't ugly because clearly the defense could do nothing with Mahomes, the run game, the pass game. They couldn't do anything. Jalen Hurts, that is the best I have ever seen him play. And the fact that he played that well in this spot, I mean, it was, wow. I went into the game worrying about his deep ball accuracy. I've never been more wrong in my life. Jalen Hurts was absolutely sensational. Not surprised if he is back a year from now.